In this episode with Rabbi Grossman, one of the things that we discuss is there this idea that because of sakana, that there's a mitzvah that we just don't do anymore. He wanted to taina that there is no such thing, and I wanted to say that there could be such a thing. And I didn't look deeply into the topic, but one example did come to mind, and I want to just mention that here, because he was asking me for examples, if I remember correctly. In the Gemara in Ksubas, on Daf Kuf Yud Amud Beis, Tosfos over there in Divrei Maschal Hu Umar Lalos brings up the idea of the mitzvah of Eretz Yisrael and why we don't do it. Rabbeinu Chaim Cohen over there says the reason is because there's so many mitzvahs hataluyos ba'aretz, and therefore we don't do the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael because we're going to do a lot of averas with people to be Oled Eretz Yisrael. It's very problematic, Rabbeinu Chaim Cohen. This is what is printed in Tosfos. This is an interesting opinion. The first thing that's brought there, I think, could be interpreted very easily as the reason why there's no mitzvah Yishuv Eretz Yisrael was manazeh, because Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael is very dangerous because of Sakanas Drachim. You can look over there. That would be an example of a precedent, of an idea, that there are certain mitzvahs that we don't do because of the Sakana that's involved. Therefore, if it is indeed a mitzvah to go up to Har HaBais, but going up to Har HaBais would cause some sort of Sakana, so maybe that's not the best idea. Just an idea to bring out to you with a particular makor. I know that was addressed, and here's a possible makor. Enjoy. Okay, Rabbi Grossman, thank you so much for joining us today on the show. I'm just going to introduce you a little bit to our viewers. So Rabbi Grossman is the director of Torah L'Maaseh program at Yeshivat Ramot in Yerushalayim and a senior editor of the Steinsaltz Center Tanakh publication project. Rabbi Grossman holds a BS in psychology from Queens College of the City University of New York, an MBA from JCT, the Jerusalem College of Technology in Israel, and a teacher's certificate from the David Yellin Academic College of Education in Yerushalayim, and holds a rabbinic ordination from BMT and from Rabbi Abba Bronspiegel, as well as, if I'm not mistaken, you're also an associate rabbi of Machon Shiloh.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Some of those things are already in the past, but yeah, I guess the resume is correct. By the way, BMT is not a reference to the classic post-high school yeshiva BMT, which used to be at the Gross Kollel. It's Beis Medrash L'Talmud in Queens. So.
Now I got you. Okay, you're back. You're
Yeah,
good.
like Lander College, Yeah.
Oh, Lander College.
Right.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold
Well,
on 1 second. Yeah.
You're good. You're okay. You're fine. I think your just connection's a little bit weak. We can keep going. That's fine. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss. Number one, I heard a rumor, which is that you have something from the Beit HaMikdash in your house. Just number one, is that true? That I have to know.
Yes, it's true.
Okay, what can you explain a little bit about that?
Yes, I was actually talking about this to some of my students just last month. Have you been to Har HaBais before? Okay, so this is already a rough discussion I found in the literature. If you go to Har HaBais, rubble from basically the Beis HaMikdash antiquities are still there, especially on the east side. The Jews haven't gotten around to fixing up the place since the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. I mean, there was what happened in the time of in time of Bar Kokhba when they started building the new edifice, and apparently the current floor of Har HaBais, part of it dates to them. But there's still a lot of rubble apparently from mostly the Second Temple and even some First Temple antiquities on Har HaBais. Now, if you look there, there's some actually quite large pieces. Some certain marble pillars are still there. Of course, they're lying on their sides. The capitals have all been arranged nicely on the south side, adjacent to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, but other pieces of fine marble are scattered about the mostly east side of the temple now. And you've probably heard that in the last 20 years, I remember hearing about this in 20 years, the Waqf has been busy taking out large quantities of antiquities that they dig out from various places of the Temple Mount and just dumping them in the Kidron Valley. People, like archaeologists and others, have actually been sifting through it and finding all sorts of pieces of obvious Beis HaMikdash antiquity. So you can still find pieces of nice marble. Yeah. So how do you know it's from the Beis HaMikdash? Because it's nice marble and it's fragmented. The history books and the Talmud report how Herod made the outer facade of the Second Temple out of very fine marble. And nowadays, pieces of that marble are still visible on the Temple Mount, and you can even pick one up sometimes. And if you're lucky enough not to get accosted by the police, you can actually walk home with it. And that's what we did. Just a little piece of marble from the temple.
Isn't
Yeah.
it on the Temple Mount proper? Aren't you standing on top of meters and meters and meters of rubble that's been basically patted down, and then you have street level? How do you have that coming up from the ground?
That is a lot of the old city of Jerusalem is like that actually. Let's say the new Jerusalem stone pavement of the old city is relatively new. As a matter of fact, there are certain places they just did in the last few years. You can imagine that in the olden days they weren't doing this, even in old Yeshuv times and in the times leading up to the founding of the state of Israel. They weren't paving the streets of old Jerusalem with Jerusalem stone. So yes, it's true. There's just layers of rubble, and you just build on top of it. That's been the way of the world, at least the way of Israel, for the last few thousand years. But there are places on the Temple Mount where, indeed, they have repaved it with nice Jerusalem stone. Some of it as recently in like the last 5 years. But there's still piles of rubble, just pushed aside by bulldozers and things on the east side. So it's still exposed. Yeah. It's actually quite interesting. I remember
go there and just pluck something.
Yeah. Well, have you been there before?
No.
Oh, really?
I haven't been on Har HaBais. No.
Wait, you're Jewish, right?
I am Jewish.
It's very surprising how a lot of Jews haven't gone there. I think it's a big scam, actually quite successful scam. Rabbi Avi Grossman attributes the scam to Yellin ben Nevat and those who carried on his legacy to try to convince good, frum Jews that they should not be going to the Beis HaMikdash. So this is there's nothing new under the sun.
But there is no Beis HaMikdash. It's not there anymore.
Well, that is true, and you're saying that with a little bit of a smirk. But as you know, many of the commandments concerning the Beis HaMikdash still apply today, and none other than the Rambam, following the Talmud, refers to the Beis HaMikdash as the Beis HaMikdash, even in its state of destruction. And he says that explicitly in his halachos. He actually says, if you've been following me, I made available online a resource which was started by Rabbi Yitzchak Brand, the Brisa Yitzchak, Rabbi Yitzchak Brand of Immanuel. He's one of the leading rabbis on Har HaBais. He's there on a quite regular basis. He's quite brilliant. And he points out that in the Talmud, Chazal refer to all of Har HaBais as the Beis HaMikdash, and the Rambam follows suit.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's take a step back so I can understand. Okay, so the Beis HaMikdash, the fact that it's referred to the Mokum HaMikdash as Beis HaMikdash, that's not what I was smirking at. And I didn't mean that in a particularly negative way either. It was more confusion.
No, I was thinking you were doing it on. I didn't think there was anything negative about that. I assumed that you were in the know.
What mitzvahs other than maybe Korban Pesach? I mean, what's shaykh to that we still have to the Mokum HaMikdash, even though the Beis HaMikdash is not there anymore? What are you referring to?
If you would open up the Sefer HaChinuch, he's very good at pointing out which mitzvahs apply and when. Right? That's the Sefer HaChinuch does. He will say at the end of a particular mitzvah says this mitzvah applies to men and women, maybe avodim also, and they'll say bisman habayis or shalom b'fnei habayis, or depending. The Rambam has a Sefer Halacha where he actually disagrees a lot with the Chinuch. First of all, in the Chinuch's numbering, the Rambam has a different way of his systemization of the commandments. Asay, lo ta'aseh, he has an entirely different list. Then every Rishon worth his salt has a list of his own, and they disagree on the fine points. But he also points out, the Rambam, I don't want to use I want to say this properly in English. You would say in Yeshiva, he's very medactic. Okay? He says it very exact. He's very precise in his language. The Rambam will tell you what mitzvahs actually apply when the Beis HaMikdash is standing and which do not. He'll, for example, tell you very explicitly, the commandment to donate half a shekel of silver towards the public sacrifices on an annual basis does not apply when the temple is not standing. So too, to bring Bikurim, or to bring Maaser Sheni, the second tithe, to Jerusalem and eat it. However, the sacrificial service still applies even when the temple is not standing. Why? Because you're supposed to rebuild the Mizbeach any day of the year, you're supposed to, and offer sacrifice. And that's why he never had a Havamina that we would ever go a year without trying to offer Korban Pesach. He says, we bring all the korbanos today, even though the temple is not standing. And by the way, apparently, history reflects this. Even after the temple was destroyed, there were Jews who came back to Har HaBais in various times and rebuilt the altar, and they still had Kohanim, they still had Big Kahuna, and they went ahead with these major sacrifices, occasionally public sacrifices and Korban Pesach. When Bar Kokhba took over It was assumed. He didn't have a Havamina not to try to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. And that's why he and his Jewish followers got to work on rebuilding the Beis HaMikdash. That is why, at various times in history, read your history book, Jews always tried to actualize these aspirations whenever they had a chance. Try to get a movement to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. The modern era, specifically the 20th century, Leminyanom, is perhaps the first time in Jewish history when the Jews were presented with an opportunity moving forward towards, let's say, something sacrificial, and they did not, by and large, take those steps, or at least the official Jewish powers did not.
I want to go, at least for myself, let's go a little slower. So the scam that you're referring to, that it's a big scam that Jews aren't going to the Beis HaMikdash. So for what reasons, what were you referring to? Because we need to build it? It's a scam that people aren't going because really Jews should be rebuilding. Is that what you're referring to? We're talking about we're talking about korbanos.
Both.
All of the above.
Everything. All of the above. The Jews are supposed to build the temple. There's a commandment to offer one lamb in the morning, one lamb in the afternoon, every single day. If you miss it, avars mano, batel korbano, but you still cannot shirk this responsibility. We have a great responsibility. That's the mitzvah. And the mitzvah being on Beis HaMikdash always applies. And the Rambam says, what if the Beis HaMikdash is built? So it means upkeeping the Beis HaMikdash and improving the Beis HaMikdash. But when it's in the state of destruction, there's a commandment upon the community to build the Beis HaMikdash. And we are ignoring that commandment. Now, as for this historical scam...
One second. So we can split that into two. One is the Binyan HaMikdash, and then one is bringing korbanos. Can we say that those are two separate things? Okay, so let's just make it... Let's just say in terms of Binyan HaMikdash, I mean, that's not such an easy discussion because Lefi Tosos Di'ime, they don't believe, or it doesn't seem, that building the Beis HaMikdash is something that we're going to do with their own two hands, right? And there were many other Rishonei Ashkenaz to feel the same, right? So would you agree to that? Okay, so then
I would agree that such an idea, that Rabbi Baruch has addressed that idea on many occasions and pointed out that it used to be everybody assumed that we'd have to try to build a Beis HaMikdash. Eventually, an idea that Rashi floated, that Rashi disagreed with when he was talking actual practice, an idea that Rashi floated that there would be a heavenly Beis HaMikdash that somehow falls out of the sky, all ready to use, became almost the default position in Judaism because we were so pathetic. I'm not saying that in a bad way. We were so downtrodden. We realized such a long gullus and nothing's improving. It must take some supernatural miracle to get things actually going. But many Rishonim never had such a Havamina. And it's been pointed out by many scholars that it's a mitzvah of the Torah. There's no such thing as God taking away a mitzvah from us and making it fall out of heaven. You don't assume that your rule of an esrog will fall out of heaven. Even messiahs don't fall out of heaven.
But would you admit that it seems like, for example, if I remember correctly, Tosos and Sukkah seems to make it sound like there's not going to be a binyan, there's going to be a nace that's going to come from Shemaim, and that's pretty much it. Do you admit that Lefi certain Rishonei Ashkenaz, they would be saying no, one should be waiting for the Beis HaMikdash to fall from Shemaim, or do you disagree with that point?
I might disagree. I would say that they saw something as so impossible, it must be that way, but they would not, let's say, ever be opposed to a Jewish national movement in the land of Israel saying, you know what, we have political power, we have the means, we have the money, we are not going to build the Beis HaMikdash because we are specifically going to wait for it to fall out of the sky. Such a thing never occurred to them. It was similar to the ingathering of the exiles. It really, how does the ingathering of the exiles take place? How has it taken place? How many times in history the Jews pick themselves up and get there, by walking or getting on their donkeys or their carriages or airplanes, whatever it might be. If Jews started believing that there would be miraculous on eagle's wings, almost literally, in gathering the exiles, and then they would stay in the exile when time came and they got an airplane or a boat or whatever to take them back, and they say, nope, now we're going to wait for some sort of miraculous teleportation device or a cloud to take us, then that would be foolish. Okay? That's not what the Tosafists or any Rishonei Ashkenaz ever believed.
Rabbi Grossman, I understand what you're saying. I will note that I do find it somewhat odd that if you learn certain Rishonei Ashkenaz that they don't really mention a possibility of a binyan. But I understand your position, and I'm not saying it's wrong at all. It just does seem a bit weird. But I'm open to that. I'm open to all of that. I do think Pashup Pshat, if you just look through the basic Gemaras, it does really seem that the Fumriyate, the Pashup Pshat, is that we're supposed to be building it with our own two hands. But I just wanted to kind of parse that a little bit to see where you're going, or where you are rather. Okay, but now the second thing is, let's talk about korbanos on the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, so that's a little bit harder for me to swallow as a scam, because, correct me, I feel like there's a lot of halachic fear. There's a lot of halachic fear of the Beis HaMikdash and the Makom HaMikdash. How do we know that all the places that we're going are places that are not going to make us be over some sort of isser, a transgression, about being on Har HaBais.
Okay, so you want to talk about where to go on Har HaBais, or how do you know? There's a lot. I am not.
In order to say that there's a scam and that there's something negative occurring, in these inyanim, I'm not claiming to be very knowledgeable, but in order to establish such a fact, you have to say that there is something that we know and people are not doing it, and that makes it improper, that makes it a scam. So I'm saying, what about us being discouraged because of possibly Surim than going up to Har HaBais? We certainly don't want a mitzvah b'avera.
I'll begin with a little bit of history because I call this a scam and I've dated it to the First Temple times. You know Tanakh, I hope, and you know about Yeravam ben Jeroboam, who became a rival king to the Davidic dynasty, perhaps even by God's own approval. That's also machlokas in the Rishonim, and perhaps even Chazal, how to understand Yeravam's appointment. Was it b'diavad, b'chakirah? Was he considered legitimate, or just was Achiashiloni appointing him like the way other kings were appointed, like anointed? Or was he just saying statement of fact that you're going to lead a rebellion, but I'm not necessarily in favor of such a thing? Okay? I think that the fact that Achiashiloni didn't even give him a little bit of anointment with some parsimony oil, Shemen HaFarsimon instead of Shemen HaMishra, indicates that he wasn't so legitimate in that sense, or he wasn't meant to be. But that's beyond the point here. Right now, Yeravam, certainly his idea, in order to maintain political power, was to convince his subjects, Am Yisrael, that they should not be attending the temple. Correct? That was his idea. Even though they had a mitzvah at the time, the Beis HaMikdash was standing. As a matter of fact, it had barely been standing for 40 years when he came up with this idea that in order to hold onto political power, he was going to both prohibit Aliyah Regel, basically at any time, not even on the holidays, but especially on the holidays, and to create rival places of worship, pilgrimage, and sacrifice. That is what he did. And that, as a public policy, was backed up by pseudo-halachic arguments and endorsements. This is a Gemara in Sanhedrin. There's a lot of midrash about this, and this is quite a few chapters of our Kisvei HaKodesh. So this is undeniable part of our Jewish history and understanding. Rabbi Victor Miller, like I said, likes to write about this. I was just telling someone, he wrote about this himself and pointed out how for a few hundred years this was the policy, the halachic policy of a Rosh Sanhedrin. And if you'd have people 200 years later after Ravam saying you're not supposed to go to that Beis HaMikdash in Jerusalem, you're supposed to instead bring your sacrifice to Dan or Beit El, then he would be following established halachic psak. Much like nowadays we follow halachic psak. I don't think Rabbi Victor Miller appreciated the irony of that, because the Yerushalmi points out that this is an idea or a tactic used by various authorities even during the Second Temple times. There were times when, for whatever reason, the Jewish or non-Jewish, by the way, or Jewish acting as non-Jewish authorities, prevented Jews from going to the Beis HaMikdash. You're probably familiar with the Medrash. Just to bring wood. The most basic sacrifice every day isn't even a lamb, it's keeping the fire going on the Mizbeach, right? You have to bring wood for that. How would they smuggle wood to the Beis HaMikdash? They didn't have enough wood to burn on the altar, so they brought kalim. If it gives an example, a large wooden ladder. A ladder's good, it has a lot of wood, okay, a lot of different pieces, and they would smuggle ladders, saying to the authorities, we're just going south towards Jerusalem with this ladder because we need to wear a bedstead. And then they'd get to the temple, and they'd take apart this kli, and they'd use it on the altar. So the fact that political bodies would want to prevent people from going to the Beis HaMikdash in order to hold on to their pseudo-religious and political power is nothing new in history. And that is what the current Israeli regime does. What?
1 second, but I didn't ask anything political. I brought a halachic concern. That was my question.
So here's my point. I'll get to that halachic concern. There are perhaps issues with going certain places in Har HaBais. If a person were to step into the Azara and he is in certain forms of impurity, he is chayav kares. That is true. And there are strict biblical and rabbinic prohibitions for various people to go onto various parts of Har HaBais, which is explicit in the Mishnah. However, it's also clear that you are supposed to go to certain places. It is very clear from elementary study of the sources and the facts on the ground in Har HaBais that where people, for example, walk today is nowhere near the Azara. We have a tradition, a positive Jewish tradition, that the Even HaShasiyah is that which is underneath the Dome of the Rock, It's also been pointed out that the Dome of the Rock is the highest point on the Temple Mount. It juts above the floor of the central platform of Temple Mount by quite a few inches, so it's unmistakable. It's always been there. This is our living tradition. Rabbi Wilson, by the way, who is the leading rabbi in Har HaBais, because he's the one who's there and he's put in all the effort and he's done all the scholarship about this, and I recommend you even speak to him if you can, has pointed out most recently that they know so much about what's going on there, and he's gotten students to actually view the Dome of the Rock because they're part of the security forces who are in charge there. Jewish policemen, riot police, and some soldiers who have been in the Dome of the Rock and have been taking photographs and measuring these things. So they know to quite a lot of precision which part of the rock, under the Dome of the Rock, was the part under the Holy of Holies, and therefore they can precisely find the Makom Mizbeach, for example, to a much greater degree of accuracy, let's say Rabbi Koren and Rabbi Goren did during their times. Okay? So we know where these things are. We know where the Azara is, and there's no chance of people getting near the Azara when they would want to stay out of the Azara. That's where the problem area is. Adarabah, you want to know where the Azara is because you have to offer sacrifice there. You have to build the Mizbeach in the proper part of the Azara. And the fact is that the Mizbeach was huge, 32 by 32 amos at its base. You know how big that is. If you think in feet or you think in meters, that's a large area. And the Mizbeach in the future, the Diavad, if you can't do it, could be anywhere as long as it's the minimum size, like it was in the Mishnah.
Your answer is maybe we don't know, and your answer is that we know. So in other words,
100% people do know.
So if I did a deep dive in the different archaeological opinions over the last 150 years, I'm going to find a tremendous consensus.
You don't even have to do archaeology. You don't have to dig anything up yet. I'm sure if you dug, you get even a better sense. But from just what's there, you can get a very good sense within a few inches of where everything is supposed to be, and they keep the Jews away from those places anyways. So you're not going to be getting into trouble by going there.
Again. In terms of using Jewish sources to know where things are, it's difficult because we don't really have a lot of texts that's talking about Har HaBais in the way that it is right now. So I'm saying because of the experiences that I think so. I mean, according to the experience, well, so then maybe you can enlighten me. But before that, so then you'll enlighten me in a moment. But in terms of the secular sources that are out there that are going to map out Har HaBais, you're telling me that there's going to be a tremendous amount of overlap. There's not going to be a lot of disagreements in terms of the location of different structures that were on Har HaBais previously. It's going to be easy. I'm not going to find a lot of discrepancy there. Is this what you're claiming?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
And halach. Well, okay. So that's important. But if that's indeed true, then yeah. I mean, if we can tell with our own eyes, plus the archaeological evidence of people studying over the last 100 years seems to say the same thing, that's a pretty good indication. Halachically, I think you say that it's very easy to know. That's again interesting to me. I find it that if we could really halachically establish with ease where everything is in Har HaBais, I would imagine that the big rabbanim of this generation and last generation and the two generations before that would be writing about the relevant areas to go to Har HaBais and be careful not to go, regardless of the socio-political climate.
Okay, well, I think they have, and I think that people have just not been listening hard enough. You know about Tchilas, right? We'll take a mashal, Ma'adev or Domeh, right? You know about the modern day Tchilas, right?
I do.
Okay, I actually wanted to show you something over here. Share a screen. Have you heard of the adoption curve?
No.
Okay, so if you allow me to share my screen, I could do that actually. Normally I can. Here, share screen. Look at this. I'm gonna share something on my screen, just so you know.
Okay.
Those who are not new to my shtick know what this is. First of all, I put something here: the adoption curve. Okay. This is with technology, but this also is with anything in Judaism. We are amkshe oref. We are stubborn. Okay? And you heard the Chasam Sofer class said, Chadash Asr min HaTorah. If it's new, it must be Asr. Now, of course, the problem is we lump together that which is new, like Reform Judaism and Bible criticism, with, let's say, Chadesh Yaminu Kekedem, means let's go back to the way things were. For example, settling the land of Israel. When it came to settling the land of Israel and perhaps even building a Jewish state, let's say 100 years ago, you were still up to the innovators, okay? The minority of people. This is population. The Y of this graph is percent of the population, and the X is how fast people are to adopt it. I would actually make this the other way. The early adopters are here, right at the beginning. These are the innovators, the ones who started, and then the early adopters. Then we have the early majority, late majority of people catching on. So nowadays, if someone would say, I think I should live in Israel, someone's going to give you an argument, no, you have to stay in Chutz La'aretz. I don't know if anybody seriously would say that anymore. I don't know if any would. You'd probably have to find a really extremist Orthodox Jewish educational institution and educators who would tell you no, that it's forbidden to live in the land of Israel. They'd be the laggards in this case of adopting that. With regards to Tcheles, we're somewhere over here, the early majority. It turns out that people really tried hard to find what the Tcheles was, especially Rav Herzog, and they found what could be. They found what could be the Tcheles, and there's a lot of reasons to assume la halacha that it is, even if you're not so certain. Like Rav Schechter says, either it's a mitzvah or it's a blue. And there were those, more and more, who put it on. And now it turns out that pictures are surfacing that even Rabbi Sternbach and Rabbi Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg were actually wearing tcheles before they, Rav Scheinberg before he passed away, and Rav Sternbach even now. So these things actually catch on, and it's just a thing of, I don't want to be different. I don't want to be seen as one of those innovators or early adopters, but everybody knows nowadays that it's a pretty safe bet to wear tcheles, at least the chumrah that you should do. So too with this whole Har HaBais issue. Okay? There is no halachic mechanism that ever prohibited it. You're not going to find a Rambam or a Shulchan Aruch or any Talmudic statement that tells you ever since the destruction of the temple, you're not allowed to go back to Har HaBais and daven there. The history indicates that Jews were always there. The Rambam writes about going there. His son wrote about going there. We know when in history Jews stopped going there. It was because the Gentiles imposed it on them. And now Jews are starting to go back. And the pendulum is beginning to swing. And we're now in the early adopters phase. And God willing, if we don't move fast enough with building the Beis HaMikdash and there's some sort of miracle, a messianic type of miracle, and maybe in 40 years we'll be in the late majority and more people are going to be going. So if you tell me that no gadol goes there, that's no true Scotsman's fallacy. I hope you know what that is. But there are gadolim who have gone to Har HaBais and who have constantly advocated for doing so. The chief rabbi himself acknowledged just a few years ago that they always discuss it in the rabbinic council. The chief rabbi himself has and his brother, the former chief rabbi, have an opposition that is borderline irrational and more like, it doesn't matter. They wrote to Rabbi Ariel, I don't care how many halachic proofs you're going to bring to me, it still has to be usher and so there and stop talking about it. So there are, this is something that we assume. I, by the way, did not grow up with this idea that it's usher to go to Har HaBais. I was taught early in yeshiva that it's technically permissible, and it's just, we don't go there. They don't let you go. It's a political thing. But the first chance I got, I went to Har HaBais because they told me actually you can go. Rabbi Moshe David Tendler has been pointing this out for many years.
Again. Yeah. Let's take so your answer basically is that the reason why Rav Yashiv and Rav Avadia and Rav Moshe and any other of the Gedolim that did talk about not going up to Har HaBais,
Rav Moshe actually permitted going to Har HaBais.
Do you have? Okay, that's amazing. For our viewers, do you know where the Makor is for that? And if you don't know now, we can add it later.
It's Igros Moshe, but I don't have it on here. The Yeshivat Har HaBais and the various other organizations have made it available. I don't know Igros Moshe by heart, but I have read it and I've seen it, and it was actually written to Rabbi Tendler, who, since at least the 1970s, regularly visited Har HaBais, and this is well documented.
There are videos of him. He
used to report to his father-in-law about going to Har HaBais. Why? Because his father-in-law wrote to him, of course there's Vadai a place to go to Har HaBais. Rabbi Tendler was being quoted in the Jewish press years ago. I'm not going to call everybody on Ma'aretz for declaring that it's us. I know that they know it's mutter. It's just what he called a political decision. Now that's not a nice word. I would explain it as a public policy decision.
So you're saying that the tshuvas that I'm going to find or the publications from these great rabbanim that say that you can't is going to just be politically motivated, meaning the halacha that they're writing.
I don't say politically motivated. It could be halachically motivated, but politics as in public policy. Policy and politics are the same shoresh, same Latin shoresh. If I could use those, but then again, because I'll use those, so I'm going to use them. It means that
let's use Rav Avadia for argument's sake. Let's use Rav Avadia as an example. So if I find a publication of Rav Avadia saying that it's usher to go into Har HaBais and he says that no one should go, what he really means is what? What he doesn't really mean that. It's not really coming from a halachic place. What are you saying about him?
Rabbi Avadia was basically saying, conflating two things. And by the way, people still do this nowadays. I'm actually quite scandalized by. There's a fellow who writes for some sort of Jewish newspaper on Long Island. He's very obscurantist in this regard. I think his name is Rabbi Hoffman. I've addressed him before for also intentionally obscuring things that Rabbi Bar Chaim has said. And it goes like this. it is true that there are places you're now going to Har HaBais. For example, what used to be the Azara. That is completely true. To tell people, and no one knows where it is, and therefore you have to stay off of all of Har HaBais because you might wander to the Azara, is an extreme jump. There might be a chumrah to tell people at one point, yes, don't go into Har HaBais because, and by the way, I'm trying to show you the picture that I told you about before. I'm trying to multitask over here.
I mean,
it's not here. Yeah,
I understand. Again, you can make such a statement, but that's a very
they are basically saying don't eat meat because you might eat chalev, or do not marry because you might violate some sort of iser nida, which by the way is also karis. Chalev and karis.
It is
go hand in hand.
Yeah, nida
so by telling everybody. You can't go to Beit HaMikdash.
The Gedolim are saying that there's a huge conflation. That's what you're saying. Everyone,
yes.
A lot of these Gedolim made a mistake. That's what you're basically claiming.
I don't know, not a mistake. No, and it better just to, instead of telling me what I'm basically saying, I think you just let me say it. I'm saying that
I'm saying it back because I'm trying to understand. Meaning, I'm happy you're telling me that
no mistake
what I'm
there.
saying is the wrong.
There's no mistake there. There's intentional conflation and then adding of the chumrah. They said we know that you can't go into the Azara. And they're saying just stay off of Har HaBais entirely because we're not going to tell you where the Azara is and we're not going to make any effort to know where the Azara is. Further, and this is the political issue. Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to understand your position, but they, if I'm not mistaken, they don't say that. They say we don't know. One does not know. Where the Azara is.
So and that's where Rabbi Tender comes in. You have to close your eyes or stick it under the sand, whichever one you want to do. That's what I'm trying to find here. I know that this edition would actually show it. We know we have a Masechta of the Talmud. We have a section of the Rambam dedicated to this very question. And if you know basic math and you start with the pinpoint of where the Dome of the Rock is and the Makom Kodesh HaKadoshim is, you can very much find, to a certain extent, where the Azara is. Okay? The Azara was almost one elevation. There was an elevated area. There's the Ezra's Kohanim, and there's the place where the Levim stood, and there's a staircase. Those various levels still exist on the Temple Mount. No one's brought a bulldozer to Temple Mount and totally leveled the place. So it's still there. Yeah.
When Rabbanim make this claim that we don't know, you say that it's ignorant. They're being ignorant.
No, I'm saying they're being obscurantist. And I'm not going to say anything more than Rabbi Tendler said. It's a political motivation. At the time, by the way, it's actually kind of interesting. I think it was. By the way, when we say lifting the Chol on Shabbos was forbidden, that's also political. It doesn't mean it's anything bad. It was a noble idea. Let's say after the 6 Day War, to first tell Jews who are not used to keeping any form of. No, I'm trying to say that the idea of Uvdin the Chol, where the rabbis impose a prohibition on something, even though it's not like a malacha or comes to do a malacha, but for whatever reason, we don't want people doing this on Shabbos. So that's with a public policy decision. Okay, public policy equals
way past that. We're talking about suffix issa daraisas over here. This isn't an uvdin dechol.
Hold on a second. Shabbos is Isuri Skila, and they're much worse than anything regarding Har HaBais. Okay, and Isur Skila carries Karis and Skila. No. I mean, when the rabbis make rules, Gedarim, and rules regarding Shabbos, Shabbos needs major siyagim all over the place because Shabbos involves Isuri Skila. And therefore, the sages take it upon themselves. Yeah. So when the sages place in the Chol, they're preserving the sanctity of the Shabbos. So too, when they impose rules on the Temple Mount, the point was to keep people away from desecrating the Temple Mount.
The parallel to me is not the same, because if you're going to say that we aren't going to go on the Temple Mount because why? Because our suffix issa daraisas, that seems like a far cry away from what would be a parallel to uvdin dechol, which is generating an issa darabanan for.
No, my whole point was that Uvdin Dechol is an example of rabbis making public policy decisions. That's all.
Okay.
Uvdin Dechol is a public policy decision, so we should not be surprised that public policy decisions are made. That's the limit of what I'm saying.
So you're saying that a Rav will say it's a suffix deraisa, not because they're really masupik per se, but rather because it's a political, it's a policy that they're trying to uphold.
And I'd like to explain this. What happened was, and there are many stories about this, I know people who did this, after the 6 Day War, well-meaning Jews would walk right into the Dome of the Rock. The first few months after the 6 Day War, Jews were walking to the Dome of the Rock, which is horrible. Okay? It is such a terrible isser. And by the way, there's still Goyim walking around there. That's also very terrible. However, we have to do something. So, L'Baal Dover Doma, they told everybody, you know what? This is, let's say, Rav Tzvi Yehuda Cook and his Chevra. They said, don't go to Har HaBais now. We have to put things in order. We have to get everybody knowing the halachas, what to do. We'll set it straight. I say this is a mashal to, let's say, young fellows in yeshiva. You want them to have proper marriages. You want to teach them how to do this right. But you also have to tell them, when you're 18, don't run around with other young women and do whatever you want. You have to put a limit on them. And you say, there's certain rules. There's nida. There's megia. There's, finding a proper shidduch. There's a lot to tell a young man, especially one who is hormonal. So eventually you tell them, we are going to do this right. We're going to educate you, and we're going to make batches, and everybody will have Shalom Yisrael eventually. But instead, they didn't do that. Instead, we're telling these young men, be celibate and never go near women of the female persuasion for the rest of your lives. And maybe 100 years from now, a shidduch will fly out of the sky, and at which point you'll be conversant in the laws of Nida. That's ridiculous. Instead, you have to try to educate people. And this mistake, this phenomenal historical mistake, is only now being corrected by trying to teach people, here are the halachas, here's how you go to mikvah, here's where you cannot go, here's why you cannot go, here's where you can go in certain circumstances, here's where you can go if you wish to actually perform the avodah. We have to educate ourselves. So I can understand why you needed a moratorium and a stop point. But to just say 50 years on, 60 years on, no Har HaBais, we're not learning halachas, we're closing shop, we're never going to tell people they can go there, it's still forbidden, is not what the Torah wanted, and is actually destructive to Am Yisrael.
If you're correct, why couldn't the Gedolim just be more honest and just say there's a significant danger because people are going right on to, Mamish Kodesh Kodashim.
And at least the Azara.
Really, okay. So let's make very clear lines.
I was not there, and I only actually became aware of these things.
It doesn't seem strange to you that the
it seems very strange to me, but luckily I was able to learn Torah from people, Rabbanim, who were of the tradition that always said, you have to go to Har HaBais, you have to go to Har HaBais, you have to go to Har HaBais. Rabbi Tendler, who I've only met a few times before he passed on, but from whom I learned a lot because I was able to read what he said and also listen to what he said this. I heard from Rabbi Rabinovich this quite a few times, from Rabbi Tzuriel, and of course Rabbi Barhim, thank God he's still with us. He comes from the Beis Medrash, which has said all along that you're supposed to go to Har HaBais, and you never were not supposed to go, and here's how you do it, and you have to spread the word. Now, if I'm one of those spreaders, then I consider myself fortunate that, for example, people like yourselves and others come to me and say, is it really true that you can go to Har HaBais? And the answer is yes. You cannot study, let's say, Talmud and Rishon without coming to this unmistakable conclusion. And if you ask me why they got to this point, I don't know, it's the story of my life. Everything I've been studying is tell people, hey, that the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet sounds like the English letter. Well, there's not an English letter equivalent, but it sounds like the way you and I say three in both and month. When I say three both and month, you don't flinch. And if I say with, you don't flinch. But if I tell you that sound exists in Hebrew, people want to stone me for such a thing. I've been persecuted in yeshiva by Russia yeshiva, pulpit rabbis, friends. You think how much sinas chinam you get for just saying, I discovered something about the Hebrew language, about the Aleph days, and they're nuts about it. So if you tell people, and by the way, that which you thought was strictly forbidden, turns out it's mutter, and here are the rabbis who say it, they'll lump you with the biggest performers. What are you supposed to do? It's the truth. The truth waits for no man. What's the exact expression there? I wish you should speak to Rabbi Barhim about this. And I wish Rav Tzuriel was still with us today, or Rabbi Rabinovich was still with us. For many years, he was taking his students to Har HaBais. You know about Rabbi Rabinovich, right?
Yeah. Listen, I'm fairly open. All I'm seeing, and I find confusing. I'm not claiming to be a Bucky. That there is a tremendous amount of information of pretty much 90% of Gedolim writing very strongly against going.
Please don't use statistics. I don't think you actually took you counted it. You defined who Gedolim are and then counted them. So you could say, well, I think the majority even then I would don't have it here.
In my experience, I've seen a large number. A person can use whatever statistic that they find when they do the research themselves of Rabbanim that I would be very fearful of, saying that not to do it and bringing halachic background. So all I'm doing is it's not accusatory. All I'm doing is just asking you what your feeling is about that. And I understand what you're saying. Your response is that what they're saying is motivated not just purely halachic, but there's something else that is going on. Perhaps it's for the safety of Klal Yisrael because a lot of them are making a lot of mistakes on Har HaBais, or perhaps there's another impetus. And because of that, they're saying things that are suffix, that maybe would be a suffix to the Am, but they themselves were probably very aware of where things started and stopped. That's your stance. I'm just trying to figure out your stance. Did I get that right?
Well, here's what I would do. Maybe it's almost a year ago, at least a few months ago, there was a fellow who said that Tzitz Eliezer wrote quite a lot about this and did not allow going to Har HaBais. Can you address what he said? Why are you not doing like the Tzitz Eliezer? So you're familiar with his tshuvas there. So we got out the tshuvas and we went through it line by line to understand what the Tzitz Eliezer was saying. If you tell me, you mentioned Rabbi Yeshiv, you mentioned Rabbi Avi Grossman, let us look at each particular opinion individually and see exactly what's there and find the points that we can rebut.
Excellent idea.
Well, first to address and rebut.
That'd be an excellent idea. I think it's an excellent idea.
Now, I put out a video, and you're welcome to see it in the sources there. We went through the Tzitz Eliezer and the points there, and we showed how the Tzitz Eliezer's own assumptions do not fit the reality. And other parts, aside from not fitting reality, are conjectural or have been disproven by the facts on the ground. I believe also if the Tzitz Eliezer were to be allowed to go to Har HaBais, which perhaps he should have in order to discover the truth of this thing, he would have not have written what he wrote. But then again, he's not here right now, and we can't go any further than that. But if you want to address any particular opinion that's in writing or the statements exactly, let's go and do that. I think that might be worthy. We might not have time to do that.
That's obviously, unfortunately, we don't have time right now, but maybe we can in the future. But that's obvious. If you've done that in a video, or if you have some textual stuff, I'd be more than happy to add it to the description here so that people can have a look for themselves. I think that's an excellent idea. Excellent idea.
Are you familiar with our YouTube channel? Rabbi Barkin has put together a very on YouTube. Yeah, a YouTube channel on YouTube. I guess that's a little redundant.
That makes sense.
Machon Shiloh, most important, it's a platform for Rabbi Barkin's shiurim and his public statements. But he also has quite a few other good content producers there. For example, at least up until last year, Jonathan Pollard's main mouthpiece was that. So to Dr. Jeremy England, who's a genius, and Rabbi Shammai Siskind. I think I'm the only person whose material appears on that website who does not have a Wikipedia page, which means I'm not famous. Okay? But it's there, and it's quite good. So check it out. And I'm looking right now for where we go through the Tzitz Eliezer's opinions. I try to find the link.
No, you can send it later, and we'll add it to the description. This probably isn't going to go release we have other episodes to release for another 3-4 weeks anyway.
Okay, I see that there are 3 videos right here. It's almost just about 2.5 hours of content on this addressing the Tzitz Eliezer on the inside, just as an example. And we also have other ones addressing Rabbi Avi Grossman and his children's opinions on this matter. So, yeah, you can find it, and we're happy to do it.
That's again, I'm not claiming to know all of these be'in. This is technically not my halachic forte personally, but I'm happy to know what your opinion is. Okay, so let me then move on to, because we split it up so far into 2 sections, which is building the Beis HaMikdash and performing certain mitzvos and Har HaBais, and you've discussed how you feel about the possible transgressions, and that, in your opinion, there wouldn't be any because things are clear. So let's talk about maybe another reason would be politically motivated, which you mentioned a few times, and then you invoke your Benavot. So let's talk about that for a moment. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, you work in a yeshiva, yes?
Well, currently, no. I'm now an independent researcher. I really should get back to yeshiva, but then I have less time to learn, so it's a little bit of a conflict.
Yeah,
I guess we'll talk about that afterwards.
Yeah. If let's say you had your own yeshiva now, okay, and you were given an option, okay, you can continue learning in your yeshiva, okay, or you could move. But if you stay where you are, then one of your Talmidim is going to have to be killed. Would you stay in that location, or would you move?
Have to be killed? What do you mean by that? That's a really strange question.
One of the students. It is a strange question, but let's answer it.
I would stay put, and I would do my best to physically defend my student. That's why I'm armed at all times, to defend myself and others. So I don't think I would agree to that.
But that's not that wasn't part of the question. You have to sacrifice one of the students. That's how it works.
I don't know. I would take a hypothetical question in the case that could actually happen in real life, but I don't know if such a thing even happening there, whereby you'd have to do it. Like the Rambam says, "In dochin nefesh b'pnei nefesh." It's sometimes happened that, let's say, the anti-Semites, come and say, "Give us one of you." I would not give over someone to die You're telling me you don't even have to get an order. They would just magically die. Like they would come in and shoot someone randomly.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yep,
that the case? So
let's
so
say.
I'd have to move the yeshiva. Or no, if I knew that case is once again like I discussed this type of question with Rabbi Barhimi said. Apparently, Rav Kook would say so. You have to fight back. Yeah, there is the third option. The third option is
Or you can
fight.
just move.
I'm not moving. Well, why do I have to move? That doesn't make any sense.
Because you don't want anyone to die.
Okay, well,
That's a good
like I
reason not to
said,
move.
that's a hypothetical, and then you give me two options. So, I don't know. If I'll ask you a hypothetical question that's ridiculous. If someone said, your wife or your daughter, what would you do?
It'd be difficult. I've thought of such a question
It'd be
before. I'd
difficult.
probably choose my
And
wife.
so it's a silly question. I don't think it
I don't
has
think
any
it's
practical
why is it silly?
bearing.
Why is it silly? Well, I think to philosophize is very important. It's
Okay,
what informs the practical.
Philosophize, I'd say, if it's a philosophy question, you have to have some sort of metaphysical power would cause one of the students to die. Okay, that's how I would phrase it. If you're asking me this, if I knew that keeping the yeshiva here or staying put would cause one of the students to die somehow beyond some supernatural means, then we could talk about it. Then
Okay,
that's then they're talking about a philosophical question.
If that's easier for you, we can start there. Let's say that you had such knowledge. Would you stay put or would you move?
So it still depends on things. Like where am I going? And why is it that I know? How is it that I have such knowledge that by staying put, I'm bringing this students in danger?
Eliyahu
Navi says, okay, now you're bringing up a different type of mechanism in the halacha. Navi says, stay put, and one of your students will die. So I would move because Navi is basically telling me about this. So there's probably Yitzhak Hashem involved in all this. But
he didn't say something to me. He just said you should be aware that if you stay, one of your students will die.
I don't know. Maybe it depends on how important it is to stay. If it's an Eretz Yisrael, maybe. There's this concept that people forget. Mechemes mitzvah means that people have to endanger themselves and perhaps even die for the sake of staying in Eretz Yisrael. People forget that point. But that's a clear halachic imperative.
Yeah, but
you have to go to war knowing that someone will die.
Yeah, well, I think the halacha comparative may be predicated on the fact that having a nation and having secure borders is what gives security for its inhabitants. Meaning, maybe you.
So is keeping the Torah. So is learning the Torah.
Well, learning the Torah is important, but I'm not sure it's as important as living. In other words, you need to be living in order to keep the Torah. That's generally how that works.
Right? Yeah, but you're bringing up a strange case of which I cannot find an analogy in real life. Halacha does well. We talk theoretics. We talk about things that are practical, and I don't see this unless you're going to give me the surprise soon. Tell me what this is.
It's obvious where I'm going. It's obvious where I'm going. I'm trying to figure out, though, however, on a more purely mechanical, philosophical level of where you are. So I could make the variables somewhat ridiculous, but they're very straightforward. I mean, it would be important, like if you would answer the question and saying, if Eliyahu Navi told me that my yeshiva will continue in either place, but my Talmud would die if I stayed in place A, then I would move. Then I would say, okay, so it seems that Limud Torah, is really important to you, but the place of your yeshiva is not as important as the life of that person. And then I would move on. And obviously, if you want, we can jump rungs over here, but I think it is important to start at the bottom because it makes things clear on the top. But let's jump to the top and see if things remain clear. I don't see the gain of pushing a presence on Har HaBais at this point, seeing that B'derech HaTeva, there's no way that we're going to be building anything there soon, and all that we're doing is we're angering the nations and probably stoking the fire, as it were.
So you must have said that on purpose. I think that it's almost a joke, or at least the refuge of halachic scoundrels to say, let us not do something that will upset the Goyim. You should know such is not a halachic concept, and also gives the Goyim veto power over anything. There are Jews, by the way, it's entirely projection. When Jews say, let us not do mitzvah X because that will upset the Goyim, and who knows, maybe they'll start massacring us or they'll create anti-Semitic movements. You know that there's no such thing in halachic history. The Goyim could say, by the way, some Goyim are upset the fact that you're wearing a yarmulke and tzitzis right now, and maybe you should stop doing that, correct? Or that you're learning Torah. You should stop doing that. Or living like Yisrael.
No, that's not correct. There's a difference between Shas Hashmad. If you want to talk about Shmad, then yeah, it is it's a lot more clear cut that you pretty much do the thing and you die with it. But I'm not sure this is a chashash of shmad. I don't think that. Would you send your kids to an institution? I don't know. No, I think that's a huge jump. Why is that a misunderstanding? I don't see Rabbanim saying, well, you see, getting a pair of tefillin would be really dangerous for people for whatever reason. So therefore, everyone should get tefillin, even though it's possible that they may die. I can't think of. I don't think that's true. You think that's true?
I don't think that whatever you said is logical in any way. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. I don't see. Well, what's the point? Because I'll realize that there's a person who has to deal with the Roman authorities, and he has to wear shoes, so he doesn't want to, and he's violating a rabbinic prohibition of Inui on Yom Kippur in order to, I guess, make nice with the Romans. And therefore, we should stay off of Har HaBais.
What's this halachic? 1 second. What is this halachic nice, as you say it? I thought that such a concept didn't exist a moment ago. Why are we finding it?
Well, here's it goes. So the answer was, in the olden days, I think I have to tell you about Jewish history. The Romans were the rulers of Eretz Yisrael, and were quite cruel. And they eventually even had in their power to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. Correct? They could have destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So Chazal even said, the classic rabbis of Haribin of Kulus, they said perhaps we should even offer a sacrifice of that which is invalid in order not to provoke the Romans into destroying the Beis HaMikdash. Correct? Right?
I mean, I think the fear there was that everyone would die.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more than the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, but yeah.
Yeah. So the destruction of Beis HaMikdash means everybody in Jerusalem is going to die also. That's what basically rolls off the two. If, let's say, Trump or Putin had the Beis HaMikdash in his sights and was threatening to destroy the Beis HaMikdash, unless I did one of our big shots were to go in front of him and violate Yom Kippur or even offer improper sacrifice, and that's what they're threatening, perhaps that should be the right decision. If we had a Zachari ben Avkula's Kamsa Bar Kamsa incident happening in front of us, then yes, we should consider that. But right now, there is no Roman emperor threatening to destroy the Beis HaMikdash if we do not violate a certain commandment or implied violation. I don't see that happening right now. Right now, we're dealing with the case whereby the Jews are staying away from the Beis HaMikdash because they are imagining all sorts of things. They're imagining that somehow walking around on Har HaBais or offering sacrifice will, get this, make the Muslim world want to destroy them. Well, I have news for you. They already want to destroy you, and they've already tried to destroy you. And your very presence in Israel is what's upsetting them.
You don't think it's going to make them take more drastic measures, immediate measures to hurt
I don't think.
people? You really don't
I think it's ridiculous to think that there's nothing more drastic than what the Iranians are trying to do. They basically declared war on us a few years ago. They've used everything in their power. You live in Jerusalem, right? You remember the missile attacks. You remember everything.
Yes, I do.
They let it all out, and apparently,
No.
I don't know if I could trust the Prime Minister entirely. I'll finish this one. The Prime Minister was saying that they're trying to create nuclear weapons to destroy us, and we have to destroy them. The people of Gaza have waged war against us.
I'm very aware, Rabbi Grossman, I'm very aware that the Iranians want to kill us. I think that if we were to, in a very big way, do anything on Har HaBais, then there would be a lot more than the Iranians.
They used to say, they were saying all sorts of things, like it's going to be the end of the world, that whole thing with the embassy. Remember that? That was a joke. You move the embassy to Jerusalem, it's going to create World War III, and this is going to create World War III. We're just letting them do that. We're asking for that. I think that's a silly thing.
You're not divorced from reality. Yeah. You really don't think there would be a more immediate, violent response if we did anything on Har HaBais that was significant? Is that what you're claiming?
Of course not. I am claiming that. I think that to think otherwise is silly. Why? Because you know they want to kill you. I heard this joke quite a few times. I hear it once a week from wise people who have come in contact with Machon Shila content. They say it's the classic joke about the Jews. You take it, they're about to be killed by the firing squad in the pogrom. They're standing outside the gas chamber in Auschwitz or at the edge of the pit in Babi Yar, about to be executed. And one Jew says, "Hey, wait a minute, maybe you should something." Everyone says, "Be quiet, you don't want to make things worse." The Goyim never need an excuse, but that's what I'm saying. This is a non-Talmudic idea. This is actually a Jewish, I guess, a stubborn Jewish facet of our inherited culture. The sages wanted us to keep the Torah. Okay? And we're supposed to keep the Torah, and the Goyim do not get a veto on us keeping the Torah. And they can't tell us, you know what, if you start doing this, we're going to be upset at you and then we're going to massacre you. I actually put out a nice video about this about 2 years ago, addressing the Aguda and Rabbi Avi Grossman about this. Instead of me saying it again, I'll send you the link. But it's kind of silly that you tell Jews, don't keep the Torah, so that you don't upset the Goyim or God's wrath. And it turns out it's actually the opposite. You're supposed to keep the Torah, and that's how you protect yourself from the Goyim.
I think it's a fair argument to say that the Torah is saying "Al pikuach nefesh" not to go up on Har HaBais. Might be a violation of the Torah for that reason to be going. It could be.
That's quite novel. You were telling me about
I don't think it's so novel to say that when there's bodily harm that will be applied to almost all Jews because of a particular action on Har HaBais, that therefore we shouldn't go up. I don't think that's if that's novel. You never thought of this before? You don't think
I've thought of this before, but I've heard this in many ways. You know, they said the same thing about living in Eretz Yisrael, but you live in Jerusalem. I think you live in Jerusalem. It looks like you are in Jerusalem now, right?
I'm in Yerushalayim.
Do you know how many Goyim have made war to try to destroy? They have destroyed us. The Goyim have said, you're like failing the X.
Rabbi Grossman,
I said mitzvah X,
As I mentioned before, I think that the national security of Eretz Yisrael is really important for the security of every single Jew. I really firmly believe that. I don't think
I'm looking over at Tel Zion. I'm looking over at Tel Zion right now. Do you know how many people told us living in Tel Zion is the problem? That's endangering Am Yisrael. Living in Tel Zion is endangering Am Yisrael. I know you didn't say that, but that's what they say. I know you didn't make that claim, but
that's nice for them.
Yeah.
The claim I am making, I usually don't make claims here, but the claim I am making is that I would think that if a person goes on to Har HaBais and does anything intense, what that's going to do is it really will incur the wrath of the Goyim, which will hurt people. And I'm not sure that that's the best thing.
Here, watch this. Look at this sentence. Okay, we will incur the wrath of the nations. Can I write it that way? Look, let me share the screen with you.
Here, okay, so then how we will incur the wrath of the nations, and therefore there will be bodily harm to Jews.
Okay, so look at this. Look, here's the fallacy. That's why I like dealing with instead of the particular cases, just the general idea. Do you see it here? Okay, look over here.
I do.
I wrote over here in my browser window because I don't have anything else to type it out. You wrote, if you do mitzvah, and I put play, we'll incur the wrath of the nations, right? Now,
yeah.
You said you put the mitzvah over here.
We'll talk about, yeah. Mm-hmm. Bodily harm, all that stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Going up to Har HaBais, which as far as I'm aware, which by the way, as far as I'm aware, is not a mitzvah. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to tell you it is, and I could bring the source, but like I said, I'm coming from the. I don't mind saying it is. I don't mind saying it is. I'm not sure that it is. But let's say it is. Okay, so yeah, I can't do this in every halachos. We just met, so now over here, I wrote this mitzvah ploni. Did you know? And I'm trying to explain this point. You put in something this. You put in what you wanted to in the sentence, and you think that this is a good argument. I'm trying to say though, that is, the highlighted point I put in wearing tzitzis, keeping kosher, bris milah, Shabbos, settling the land. You pick it. There's a whole Torah full of mitzvahs you can do where I could put in the mitzvah and I could show you examples historically and even today where we will incur the wrath of the nations.
I think people should not. Then I think people should not wear tzitzis. People should not wear four-corner garments. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. People should not wear four-corner garments. They're going to get killed for it. Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
And the problem with this argument, I know they teach us in law school also, but this is saying that I remember discussing with Rav. This argument proves too much. It basically gives the nations, it gives Esav a veto on keeping the Torah. They say this about Torah study, by the way, also. Okay? If you do Torah study, and you know history well, we will incur the wrath of the nation to be kuach nefesh. Therefore, we should not study Torah. Or, if we reproduce, we will incur the wrath of the Egyptians, and therefore, we should not reproduce. This was a machlokas, Amram and his daughter, I believe. It's mentioned in the Medrash. Therefore, this idea is nonsense, because it proves too much, and it leads to an absurd conclusion. So whether you put Temple Mount here, Hodis HaKorbanos, etc., tzitzis, whatever mitzvah you put in here, it doesn't matter because this argument is too strong, has been disproven by our sages, and whatever. There you go. I think that settles it. You see that, right?
No, I don't. I think that I don't see Chazal disagreeing with, let's say, mitzvah tzitzis, which is not a mitzvah chiyuv.
Well,
if you're not wearing a dal kanfas.
if it's shot, and by the way, the point of Shas Shmad is that even for the little mitzvahs, if they would say if there's a Shmad going on, if they're Shmading and they say don't do tzitzis, so you're supposed to wear the tzitzis.
That's right. You're
supposed to wear the tzitzis.
If it's shmad, then it's something else. I don't think it's shmad. I don't think they don't want us to be from. I think they want us to
No, that's what shmad is called the chomer. Shmad is called the chomer.
No, it's not. No, it's not shmad. No,
yes, it is.
Shmad is trying to destroy your religiosity. That's what shmad is. They're not trying to destroy our religiosity. They're trying to destroy our bodies, which is pretty bad, but it's not as valuable as our religiosity. It's not as valuable.
I said it's a kal v'chomer that we cannot give the goyim this veto
it's not a kal
by saying any mitzvah they choose.
No, that's what I'm saying. The kal v'chomer is backwards. It'd be a chomer v'kal.
No, by being by kal v'chomer, I'm saying that it doesn't matter which mitzvah you put into here. Okay? Sometimes you have to do the mitzvah. In other cases, the kal is what we choose to do it. Okay? We can choose to do mitzvahs, and if at certain points we were told daf could go and do it. Okay? During Shas Shmad, daf could go and do it. Then of course, when there is no shmad and they're not threatening us explicitly, then of course we can go and do the mitzvahs. Okay? There is no.
I don't. You don't need. You're saying that we need more of an explicit threat. Is that it? Then
I'm trying to say if they give us an explicit threat, don't go to our HaBais. If you could actually point to the group that was saying this, don't go to our HaBais, and they have the power to do shmad to us, then we would be giving our lives. I would say you have to go at gunpoint, go to Har HaBais and go and not give up on it because that's the shmad. They're trying to take it away from us. Right now,
what if you're saying it's not shmad?
Right now,
we just want you all dead. Man, what if it's just?
Then this is
you're encroaching on my area, so I'm just going to kill you more. Well, what if that's what they're saying?
So and the rule is, like I just said before, it doesn't matter what mitzvah you put into the blank space over here. Okay, this is a non-halachic, non-Talmudic argument that has been disproven already. And that is, the goyim do not have veto power. I know, so you're late to the game, you know. Like I tell youngsters who come and they never heard this, you know.
It could be I'm late to the game, but I don't think you're being very clear because I'm not hearing what you're saying. How it
the goyim do not get a veto on us keeping. The goyim do not get a veto on us keeping the mitzvahs. That's it. And they've said it before. Like I gave you other physical examples. There is a movement, right? An actual goyish movement to destroy the Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael.
So I answered that already. I think Yeshivat Eretz Yisrael is very different because I think that national security, the security of every single Jew, is different. I think that you've chosen an exception to the rule.
No, there is no exception. The Torah is 100%. We have to keep the Torah. We can't say, you know what, if they threaten Shabbos and Kashrus, then we'll have to give our lives. But there are things we're willing to give up on the long term for decades and centuries if possible because we don't want to upset them. Go and get to veto and get to limit our Judaism. That is nonsense. I mean, there's no Talmudic precedent for such a thing. We find instances in history where it's been disproven. That is just a Jewish feeling or a Jewish idea that's more like kosher, like your children has to have a certain flavor to it. But that's not halacha. That's not how Talmud works. That's not what the Bali Muslim want you to do. They want you to keep the Torah.
I understand that they want us to keep the Torah. Okay, my argument was different. Is that when it comes to danger, I'm not sure that it's so simple that they all want us to keep the Torah at the expense of
you have to show danger. It's just I don't know who said this.
Okay, so
then you and I had to address youngsters saying this for a very long time actually.
So it could be that I'm on the side of the youngsters. Perhaps that you and I just have a disagreement on what the other side is saying. I think the other side is saying we want you dead and we will kill you more if you do these things, and you're claiming not.
I'm claiming, and I'm also claiming that they say that about you living in Jerusalem also, but you're not running away from Jerusalem right now. They actually do say that.
But I know, but I told you why I think that's different. I told you why.
That's not a real chiluk. You know, they're going to say that about everything. Like I said, you're giving the goyim a veto to do.
No. The chiluk I made was national security. Tefillin is not derech hateva a part of national security. Living in Eretz Yisrael is. I do.
Okay, and also keeping the Beis HaMikdash is part of it. Keeping all the mitzvahs together is part of it.
Why is having a Beis HaMikdash part of national security? It's not part of national security.
Yeah, I don't. Ask you to mock me. Oh, by the way, what's today's date? Today is the 17th of Kislev, if I'm not mistaken. In a week from tonight, we're going to be celebrating what I believe is a Jewish holiday, which I also believe is many Jews are completely disconnected and go along with this. The Jews fought in the Milchemes Mitzvah to regain the Har HaBais and rebuild the Mizbeach and rededicate the temples to have the korbanos. Right now, you are making the argument against Yudah Maccabee and the Hashmonaim. I don't know
No,
if
I'm
you would
not.
keep. If you would.
No, I'm
Yes,
not.
you are. You just
No,
made it.
no,
Yeah,
no,
I'm
no.
trying to
I'm not.
make. We need another Yudah Maccabee today. If Bob Desir were here and saying, you know what, we need to get.
Yisrael was not going to let the Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah.
He had the option of not having it remain into the enemy's hands. We are going to let that mosque stay on Har HaBais for a long period of time. If that's really what we're going to do, well, that's what it seems. If that's really what we're going to do, okay, and we think that they're going to be there for a while and there's going to be danger, so then yeah, I don't know why to just ruffle people's feathers for no reason.
No,
In the time,
never mind.
of the Maccabee, what we're going to do is we're going to push the Seleucids out, which we did completely. That was the idea, to make a perimeter,
Well, it
to
took
push
them
people
a
out.
few decades.
It
You should know.
It did, but that was the idea. The idea was to push them all out. That was the idea. Here, the idea right now is that we're not pushing everyone out. If we're pushing everyone out, then I hear. Honestly, we're not pushing everyone out, so then what's the point?
So there's different ways of going about doing this. You should know, I believe that for now, I myself cannot build a Mizbeach or for korbanos, and that's not what I am trying to do. I'm trying to go to HaBais and encourage more people and make it naturally more of a Jewish place. And hopefully, we'll be able to get enough Jews, or just create our own government, to push out the enemy and to reinstate Shevet Levi and put them in charge there. There's a lot of ways to go about doing this, but the goal is the same: the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash and the reinstitution of the sacrificial service. To go and tell me that I should stay off of Har HaBais entirely, it flies in the face of Jewish history and our greatest heroes. They wouldn't have not allowed such a thing. David HaMelech did not stand for such a thing. Like I said, we're about to celebrate the holiday of the Jews who decided they were not going to tolerate this anymore. And also the Avodah Zarah that was existing.
I told you what I thought.
And they went to war for it. Yeah. Okay, so maybe you want to go on to a different topic. Yeah.
No, I'm very much enjoying discussing this topic, but we're out of time, so I have to go. But Rabbi Grossman, thank you for joining us. I
was going to say that that's it.
I learned so much from this experience.
Really, I still have 20 minutes.
Cover more, but I ran out of time. I have to go. But Rabbi Grossman, maybe we'll have this conversation again. I really appreciate you having it with us. It was very informative. Thank you so much.
By the way, okay, if you now that we could cut, I guess you're going to put this up not online. If you want to speak again, or you want to